Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Oh, Miss Lucy dead and gone, left me here to weep and moan. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down. Last done start, gotta tell the ground. Oh, Miss Lucy dead and gone, left me here to weep and moan.
Welcome to Bostwick House, completed in 1746 by English-born merchant Christopher Lowndes. The house and surrounding landscape that we see today was significantly renovated during the early 20th century in the colonial revival style. Lowndes purchased Lot 52 in Bladensburg about 1743 and began construction of Bostwick within a year or two, completing the structure in 1746. That same year, he purchased an adjacent lot, which is noted as being, quote, on the south side of ye lot, where the said Christopher Lowndes' new dwelling house standeth. Built in Flemish bond brick, the 2.5-story structure has a large room or salon for entertaining on one side of the first floor passage, and a dining room and back room on the other. The second floor contained 4 chambers or bedrooms, 2 on each side of the passage. Lowndes likely played an active role in the design and construction of the house, named for Bostock, his family home in Cheshire, England. Lowndes had in his employ numerous indentured and enslaved craftsmen and laborers, including an indentured mason and bricklayer brought from Cheshire, as well as a plasterer. In 1776, Lowndes owned 41 enslaved men, women, and children, and at his death in 1785, he owned 37, including Tom, recorded as a carpenter, and another Tom, recorded as a carter. Thus it was the labor of enslaved Africans that literally built the house and transformed the landscape, carving into the hillside for the house and building the terraces that stepped down to the river. Their hands formed the bricks from local clay, mixed the mortar, and provided the labor to lay up the brick structure. They also likely fashioned and erected the massive timber roof structure. Perhaps Tom, the carpenter, participated. The attic contained 2 heated rooms and 2 storerooms that were the living spaces for some of the enslaved workers. Others lived in space over the kitchen and wash house, or in farm outbuildings. A newspaper advertisement for the sale of the property in 1816, following the death of Benjamin Stoddard, mentions, quote, an excellent kitchen and wash house with very good apartments for servants. While we don't know exactly where all of Lowndes' enslaved workers lived, based on other houses of similar size, it seems likely that about 10 enslaved workers were needed to run the household and would have lived in and around the main house. Others clearly worked in Lowndes' various businesses, for example, Tom, the shipwright, in Lowndes' shipyard. Christopher Lowndes established his successful mercantile business under the name of Christopher Lowndes and Company. His store, possibly located in the Market Master's house in Bladensburg, stocked a wide range of goods including ceramics, glassware, tools, spices, hardware, and books. It seems likely that Tom, the enslaved worker recorded as a carter, hauled goods for the store. Others no doubt worked to load and unload ships and wagons of goods. Lowndes and his partner Benjamin Tasker also imported and sold large groups of enslaved Africans at Bladensburg, Annapolis, and Frederick. In a 1752 ad for the Maryland Gazette, they announced the sale of, quote, a parcel of healthy slaves, men, women, and children, just imported directly from the coast of Africa. Lowndes' other businesses in Bladensburg, including a rope walk and shipbuilding works, as well as interest in the commercial shipping trade, all businesses that ran and succeeded on the labor of enslaved workers. We know from a 1764 runaway advertisement in the Maryland Gazette that Lowndes used enslaved workers as skilled ship's carpenters and caulkers, and that the rope walk was also staffed with enslaved workers. As such, the enslaved workers of Bostwick House literally built the wealth of Bladensburg merchants like Christopher Lowndes.
The port towns in Bladensburg Waterfront Park. Situated along the Anacostia River, the communities of Bladensburg, Colmar Manor, Cottage City, and Edmonston serve as gateways between Washington, D.C. and Prince George's County. They share a history that goes back to the days when the Anacostia was a major East Coast commercial artery. The Bladensburg Waterfront Park is thought to be the location of the Port o' Bladensburg. In 1742, 46 years after the founding of Prince George's County, a group of leading citizens selected the site to cater to the tobacco growers of the eastern branch of the Potomac River. Deep and wide enough to accommodate large ships, it was one of the most ample harbors in colonial America. Africans first came to colonial Maryland as indentured servants. When labor intensive tobacco became the principal crop in southern Maryland, African slaves were brought in as replacements. By the time Prince George's County was established in 1696, the colony was importing large numbers of Africans. As Maryland prospered, the slave trade increased. Lowndes Francis invested in ships that made 37 voyages between 1746 and 1770, carrying 9,637 enslaved people, according to James H. Johnston's From Slave Ship to Harvard. According to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, 13.5% of the enslaved people on the Lowndes ship died in transit on average. Active slave markets in port towns of Upper Marlboro, Queen Anne Town, Nottingham, and Piscataway sold Africans at auction, often separating family members. Although Maryland economy diversified, tobacco remained the crop in Prince George's County, where slavery continued to expand. By the middle of the 18th century, Africans comprised less than one third of Maryland's total population, but they counted for nearly 50% of the population in Prince George's County. A century later, on the eve of the Civil War, the county was nearly 60% black, and the number of free blacks had grown to 10% of the total population. When the war began, Many of Maryland's African Americans, both free and enslaved, enlisted to serve in the Union Army and Navy. In April of 1862, as the war entered its second year, Congress passed the Compensated Emancipation Act, which freed slaves in the District of Columbia, prompting an exodus from neighboring Prince George's County into the district. The following year, President Abraham Lincoln issued two executive orders. The second, the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1863, stated that all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. The act did not apply to Maryland, however, because despite wide sympathy for the Confederate cause, the border state had not seceded from the Union and was not in rebellion against the United States. Maryland's slaves finally were freed with the enactment of an amendment to the Maryland Constitution in 1864, which took effect in January 1865, 11 months before the ratification of the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which outlawed slavery in all states. Today, the contemporary site, formerly home of the Bladensburg Marina, was revitalized in 2000 as the Bladensburg Waterfront Park. The park now features a visitors center, fishing pier, public boat ramp, a pavilion with concerts and annual festivals. Visitors will also find guided canoe tours, pontoon boat rides, children's playground, bike trails, and many more attractions. All are welcome to come and visit the beautiful Bladensburg Waterfront Park. This is a moment of Black history in the town of Bladensburg, located in Prince George's County.
Set at the rear of a long, narrow lot on 48th Street is an 18th century vernacular stone dwelling named the Market Master House. This stone structure was originally built by Christopher Lowndes, an English merchant and owner of Boswick House. Lowndes used it as a business office, and its proximity to the square meant that tobacco inspectors likely operated here as well. Recent investigations suggest that the house served as a post office and stagecoach stop. Since the 1850s, the house has been a single-family residence. Bladensburg has always had a substantial African American population, although blacks made up a smaller percentage of the total population than in other parts of Prince George's County. Enslaved Africans and indentured servants grew most of the tobacco that was inspected and shipped from the wharves in colonial Bladensburg. They loaded the ships, built the houses, and performed much of the labor in this thriving town. By the end of the 18th century, some free blacks were engaged in successful commercial ventures, such as innkeeper Margaret Adams. One happy client, President George Washington, referred to her as the old black woman who keeps the best house in town. Colonial Bladensburg's market, located near the waterfront, was a bustling center of commerce and economic center for the region. Reportedly, slaves were sold at the market master's house. The stone used for this house is believed to have been salvaged from discarded ships. The Market Master House is one of 5 original buildings left standing in the town of Bladensburg.
The remarkable history of the Bladensburg Church. In an industrial park located on a snug little plot of land in Bladensburg lies a tiny red brick church at 4107 47th Street with a remarkable history dating back to the end of the Civil War. Built in 1808, the building started out as a Presbyterian church and is one of just 5 buildings in Bladensburg built before the 20th century that survive today. Since the end of the transatlantic slave trade in 1808, Maryland had become an exploiter of American-born enslaved people to southern states, coming into the port of Bladensburg, now named the Bladensburg Waterfront Park, where Sarah Miranda Plummer was sold in November of 1860 at the age of 18 to a notorious slave trader for $1,000. Plummer's father, a slave at Riversdale, taught her to read and write before she was sold. Plummer, after being sold and shipped to New Orleans, remained stoked. In October 1866, Plummer's family back in Maryland resolved to find her, scraping together $250. Plummer's mother sold the money for the 2 return tickets inside the pocket of a dark blue flanneled undershirt and sent 22-year-old Henry to find her. And he did just that. After the 2 siblings returned to Bladensburg, Plummer converted her family and friends to her new Baptist faith. By the year 1874, the congregation, which had become known as the St. Paul's Baptist, first African-American church in Bladensburg, had grown large enough to buy the Presbyterian church, where it stayed until moving to a new location in 1973. Among the Plummer family, the return of Miranda from New Orleans to Bladensburg was marked as a turning point in 1866, which is memorialized in a sign by the front of the door of the church. First Baptist Church, erected 1718, organized October 19th, 1866, rebuilt 1908 after a fire. The church remains and was what was formerly the St. Paul's Baptist Church is now Kingdom Missionary Baptist Church, and now is serving as the Rocco de los Siglos congregation.
The War of 1812 Memorial, located in Bladensburg, presents Commodore Joshua Barney, not in a moment of triumph, but shortly after he is wounded. He's being assisted by Charles Ball, a former slave and member of the flotilla who fought alongside Barney at the Battle of Bladensburg. The other figure represents a member of the Marines. All 3 figures are looking up, undaunted, with their weapons at the ready. Charles Ball, who was once enslaved, is depicted heroically on the War of 1812 Bladensburg Memorial, undaunted in battle, which is an 8-foot by 10-foot bronze sculpture located near the Peace Cross at the intersection of Baltimore Avenue and Bladensburg Road. Born into slavery in Calvert County around 1780, Ball was bought and sold several times before he escaped a particularly cruel family in Georgia in 1810 to reunite with his wife and children. He worked as a free man for various Maryland farmers before enlisting in the Chesapeake Bay Flotilla commanded by Barney. African Americans also fought on the British side in the battle, as the Royal Navy recruited enslaved men with the promise of freedom and relocated them and their families to Nova Scotia and Bermuda after the war. After the war, Ball's wife died, and he remarried and bought a small farm of his own. Then, in 1830, a member of the Georgia family he had escaped tracked him down and had him kidnapped from his farm. After 2 weeks in jail, Ball was taken in chains to Georgia, a trip which took him right through Bladensburg. Ball eventually escaped the Georgia plantation and made his way back to Maryland, where he learned that his wife and children had also been kidnapped and his farm taken over by a white man. With no legal ability to fight for his land and no way to find his family, he moved to Pennsylvania, where he wrote a memoir with the help of a white lawyer. After the book was published in 1836, nothing more is known of Ball's life or the fate of his wife and children, but his memory lives on at the Bladensburg Memorial.
Thank you for tuning in for the 2022 Town of Bladensburg Black History Month program. I'm Mayor James, and I hope you enjoyed storytelling through our historical sites. This year's program was a special collaboration of the Program Planning Committee consisting of Mrs. Diane Griffin Horn, Mr. Rich Charnovich, Mr. Ray Jeffries, and Council Member Trina Brown. Thank you all for your time, effort, and dedication to pulling together this year's program. We also have special acknowledgements that we would like to make to our volunteer videographer, Officer Paul Porter, and our historical expert who lent us some of his time, Professor Don Linebaugh of the University of Maryland. Thank you all again for your effort, your collaboration in pulling our project together. We believe that it will be of great educational value to the community, and we couldn't have done this without you. To everyone again who tuned in, we appreciate your time and hope that you learned something new that you didn't know about the town of Bladensburg from this year's program. Again, thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.